Welcome to DDL, where we discuss everyday topics like current events and or controversial points of view. This is No, I'm Void. First things first, shout out to our sponsor, Candle Time. Head over to the link in the description to purchase a candle today.
Hey everyone, welcome to Tuesday. Hope everyone had a happy Easter. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Nix. Working with her, and we got an interesting topic, I think, more related to dad life versus the politics stuff. But let's get into it. Nix, go ahead and introduce yourself and what we're going to be talking about today.
Hey everyone, this is Nix, and welcome back to another episode of Discussing Dad Life. Today, we're diving into a topic that's really become a part of the fabric of modern parenting: remote work, specifically how it affects dads. With more and more jobs shifting to work from home setups, dads are finding themselves balancing family life and work life in ways they haven't had to before. So, we're going to break down the pros and cons of remote work for dads, how it changes the dynamic at home, and whether it's a game changer or just another stress factor. Captain, why don't you kick things off with some thoughts?
Ah, excellent idea. Excellent idea. So I do work partly remote from home. I spend about roughly half my week at the house, which there's a benefit, which is I get to see my
That's a
kids a lot more.
solid balance. Having that time at home must make a big difference. On one hand, you're able to be there more for the family, but on the other, it can blur those lines between work and personal time. What would you say are the biggest pros for you in working remotely?
More time with the kids is definitely the biggest pro, and then biggest con actually is more time with the kids. As surprisingly as that is, I guess that's kind of surprising, but they're both kind of, it's a pro and a con.
That's a great point. More time with the kids is awesome, but it can also be a lot to juggle, especially when work is still demanding. Sometimes it's tough to balance being present for them while also staying focused on your tasks. Do you ever find that you struggle to switch off from work when you're at home?
Yeah, I mean, we're recording at 11 p.m. right now, and I just finished working about 20 minutes ago. I've been up since oh about 5:30 in the morning. That's dealing with getting kids ready for school, getting my work done before I have to take them to school, and then you know appointments throughout the day, kind of pushing things back, and then just so it makes for a long day, and it makes it hard, especially when you gotta get them to school, get them fed. It does kind of hinder your ability to stay focused on a task.
That sounds exhausting. It's tough to keep that focus when you're wearing so many hats. Having to manage the kids, work, and everything in between, especially when you're doing it all remotely, can blur the lines between home life and work life. How do you typically handle that transition from work to family mode? Does it ever feel like you're constantly juggling both?
It always feels like I'm juggling both. So it's nice because they each have their own routines, so it's pretty feasible to plan out the day around their needs, and then squeezing in the things I need to get done between events. So I mean, there is some structure to it, so it's not like a free for all. It just does sometimes lead into a little bit longer of a day, especially when things don't go as planned.
That makes sense. It's great that you have some structure, but like you said, those unexpected things can throw everything off. It's definitely a balance between being flexible and making sure you're still getting things done. It must be nice when everything falls into place, but I can imagine those curveballs can be really frustrating at times. What do you think is the biggest challenge you face when things don't go as planned? Is it finding time for work or more about managing the kids' needs and then still having time for yourself?
Um, yeah, it's a little bit of mixture of everything. It depends on what event is pushing what event back. So it all depends. But what I'd like to do, Nix, is why don't we go ahead and why don't you list off the three top pros of remote work for fathers?
Got it, Captain. Here are three top pros of remote work for fathers. One, flexibility in scheduling. Remote work offers dads the ability to create their own schedule. This means being able to attend school events, doctor's appointments, or simply taking a break to spend time with the kids without the strict confines of a 9 to 5 office job. Two, increased family time. With the ability to work from home, dads can be more present throughout the day, from helping with homework to simply being there during mealtimes. This proximity strengthens family bonds and allows for more shared experiences with their children. 3. Reduced commute stress. One of the biggest stress relievers of working from home is eliminating the daily commute. This not only saves time, but also reduces the fatigue that comes with long hours in traffic or crowded public transport, which leaves dads with more energy for their families. What do you think? Should we dive into the cons now?
Yeah, I think we kind of covered every pro other than the transit times. That was an interesting pro that you brought up there. Hadn't even thought about that. I wonder if that couldn't necessarily be a negative though too, because I remember when I was working um, long shifts, I would actually enjoy that unwinding time in the car.
You're absolutely right, Captain. That unwinding time during a commute can be valuable, especially for dads juggling busy schedules. It gives you a moment to mentally transition from work mode to home mode, or vice versa. For some, it's a much needed break to decompress, listen to music, or even catch up on podcasts, just like this one. That brings an interesting layer to the remote work dynamic. Without that commute, you're always on, which can make it harder to mentally switch off at the end of the day. Some people miss that clear boundary between work and home life. Now that we've explored the pros, how about we dive into the cons of remote work for fathers?
Yeah,
What are
let's.
some of the biggest challenges?
Oh, I think some of the biggest challenges for remote work is being able to have a standard schedule. Um, I think that would be the number one. The number two, I think, is going to be motivation, keeping yourself on task. And I think the third one is going to be, well, I guess it ties into the other one, which is mismanagement of time.
Isolation. Being remote can lead to feeling disconnected from coworkers, which can affect both your professional relationships and even your sense of camaraderie. Without the face to face interactions or spontaneous water cooler chats, it's easy to feel like you're working in a vacuum, which can be a little demotivating. What are your thoughts on these cons, Captain? Have you had to deal with any of these personally?
The isolation definitely is something. So I'm the only service rep in the southern Idaho area. So typically, I only get to see coworkers maybe once a month, if that. Sometimes it's going upwards of 3 or 4 months. So the isolation, not really feeling part of the team, does is an effect on there. Yeah, I would agree with that.
That isolation aspect can be tough, especially when you're used to being part of a team. It's easy to forget how much those casual interactions and the feeling of being connected to others can boost your mood and motivation at work. Do you think that could be improved by video meetings or having more virtual check ins? Or do you think it's just one of those things you have to accept with the territory?
Well, it's interesting that you bring up video meetings. So I do actually have quite a bit of video meetings, and that does alleviate some of that part of the team aspect. However, it enters into another con of working remotely, which is when your children are home and you are trying to do your video meetings, the interruptions, and that stuff. It makes it hard to have a professional conversation.
Oh, I can see how that would be a big challenge. Video meetings can help with that sense of connection, but it's tough to juggle when kids are around. Especially with kids, it's hard to predict what might happen during a meeting. Have you found any strategies to manage the kids' interruptions during video calls? Or is it more of a constant work in progress?
I think it's a mixture. So, luckily, I can tell my daughter, "Hey, I have a meeting. I'm going to be busy for the next 30 minutes. Can you please help your brother if he needs anything?" Or talk to the older brother and be like, "Hey, I'm going to be busy. Can you take the kids outside or something like that?" Um, does that always work? No, especially with the younger one. That one requires a little bit more attention. So, it is nice having older children. They can help out with the younger children, but it's hit or miss.
That sounds like a good system you've set up, especially with having older kids to help. It's great that you're able to lean on them for support, but I bet it can still be a little unpredictable. Kids have a way of knowing when you're in a meeting and really needing your attention. Have you found certain times or routines that work better for managing those interruptions, like scheduling around naps or school pickups?
Uh, well, none of my kids really take naps anymore, and this is usually only a problem when they're at home, which is why I tend to schedule my meetings or try to schedule all my meetings either when I'm in the car or when they're at school. So yeah, that makes it a little bit easier. But there are times where the children will be home, like they're off of school, and meetings have to happen. So, it is what it happens. Some life happens. You just kind of got to roll with it. Luckily, the company I work with, they're actually pretty family oriented, so none of it's really a big deal.
That's a huge benefit, having a company that understands and supports family life like that. It makes a world of difference when you don't have to stress about being a dad while working. But you're right, sometimes life just happens and you can't always plan for it. Do you think you've become better at handling those situations over time? Or do you still have those oops moments now and then?
Oh yeah, they definitely happen now and then. And like you were saying, children have like a radar or sense. They have like a sixth sense. As soon as you get on a phone or as soon as you get on a meeting, they're just like right next to your side. They want to know what's going on. It's kind of entertaining.
Yeah, it's like they can sense the exact moment you need quiet. It's almost like they're drawn to the attention you can't give them. But at least it adds a bit of humor to the chaos. How do you typically handle it when they do pop in unexpectedly? Does it ever turn into a funny moment that lightens up the situation?
Not that I can recall. I typically just mute myself and then quickly ask them what's going on and then try dealing with it so I can get back into the meeting. But there's everyone's going to have their own options of ways doing it. Somebody might decide like, hey, I'm going to lock myself in the room. I don't necessarily know if that's a great idea, but I still think you need to be accessible to your children. So I think everyone's going to have to kind of figure out what works for them and just realize that you may come up with the best plan ever, but executing that plan may not always go accordingly.
Exactly. You can have the perfect plan, but life will always throw in those curveballs. It really comes down to being flexible and adjusting as you go. Kids are unpredictable, and sometimes the best you can do is just roll with it. It's all part of the juggling act, but I think it makes the moments when everything works out just a bit sweeter. Do you find it helps in the end to have that work from home flexibility, even with all the little challenges?
I have found it to be very useful, being able to schedule doctor's appointments, dentist appointments, whatever needs to happen. It makes the flexibility aspect of working remotely is one of the best perks of working remotely. Um, so I think that in and of itself pays all the trade off for any of the cons. But what are some other positives about working remotely?
I totally get that. The flexibility really is a game changer, especially when it comes to managing family life and personal appointments. Another big plus of remote work is the ability to create your own work environment. You can personalize your workspace to make it comfortable and productive for you. Whether it's playing music, having the right lighting, or just setting up your desk in a way that feels right, it can increase focus and overall job satisfaction. Also, there's often less office drama. You're not dealing with the constant interruptions, gossip, or the need to be seen in the office, which can be mentally exhausting. It's more about getting the work done, and if you can manage your time well, you're in control of your own success. Does that resonate with you at all?
Yeah, definitely the office politics aspect of not having to deal with that does actually make work a little bit more bearable, I guess. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. It's less of a distraction, so you can concentrate on your work more. So I would agree with that. What about some other cons? I know we hit a few of the cons, but there's I'm not sure if there's really any more cons other than the
I hear you
distractions.
on the office politics thing. It's nice to just focus on the work and not the drama around it. But as for more cons, one thing I've noticed with remote work is the always on feeling. Because you're at home, it's easy for work to bleed into personal time. You might feel like you're never fully off the clock, especially if you're dealing with late meetings or emails that need to be responded to outside of business hours. It can blur those boundaries and affect your work life balance. Another con is the lack of career visibility. While working remotely can be awesome for flexibility, sometimes it's harder to get noticed by higher ups or to build those relationships that lead to promotions or growth opportunities. You're just not there physically, so it can be harder to make those connections that might be easier in an in person setting. Do either of those resonate with you? Or am I missing something you've experienced?
No, I think those are really major cons is the interruptions, the distractions, the isolation, and you are right that isolation does come with the not being seen, so it makes quote unquote promotions a little bit more difficult to achieve. So yeah, and I think the best way to about going about doing that is making yourself active via email, participating in team events, or interacting with larger team meetings when those occur. That way, you are getting some of it. One thing I did like about my boss's boss actually is once a month he would sit down and hour long conversation with every single one of the reps, which was really nice.
That's a great approach. Staying visible through emails and team meetings can definitely help, especially when you're remote. The monthly sit downs with your boss's boss sounds like a fantastic way to maintain that connection and ensure you're on their radar. It's a great example of proactive communication and involvement, which is key when you're not physically present. It helps remind them that you're still an active, engaged team member. Have you found those sit downs helpful for staying aligned with company goals or just maintaining a sense of connection with the team? Or do you think that's something more companies should do to help remote employees feel less isolated?
I think it's actually something more companies should do to make them feel less isolated. Not only was it about making sure that we're aligned with what the company's goals are, it was actually also personal goals, personal growth, and seeing how things are going in the personal life. So it was actually a very beneficial and very meaningful way to keep someone motivated and encouraged.
That's a really great point. It's easy to forget how important those personal check ins can be for motivation and overall well being, especially when you're remote. It's more than just checking boxes, it's showing that the company cares about you as a person and not just an employee. Those kinds of personal growth discussions can really help foster a sense of belonging, even if you're not physically in the office. Plus, it helps you stay connected to the company's culture in a more meaningful way. I think more companies could definitely benefit from making time for these types of check ins. It gives employees a space to talk about challenges they may not have the opportunity to otherwise and ensures they're not feeling like they're drifting. How do you think companies could implement that kind of practice if they're not already doing it?
Well, I think it's behooves the individual to do it. I don't necessarily know if you can actually mandate that because it's a personal connection. It's not something that it's kind of generic. But I was just actually thinking there is another con that we really didn't discuss, which is when you are busy with a meeting or on a phone call or working and your children, what should you encourage your children to do? Because I'm sitting here thinking setting them down in front of a tablet or a TV is not now isn't going to be the best thing to do, but encouragement to have them play outside and everything, that's one aspect I think we should dive into just a little bit, if you don't mind.
That's a great point. When you're in the middle of something and your kids need attention, it can be tricky to balance. Encouraging them to play outside is definitely a solid option, as it gives them a chance to burn off energy while you focus on your work. But as you said, relying on a tablet or TV too much isn't ideal, especially when you're trying to promote active, healthy play. It's about finding the right balance and setting them up with engaging activities that don't require you to constantly intervene. How do you usually approach that situation when it comes up? Do you have go-to activities or strategies that help keep your kids engaged while you're in the middle of work?
I tend to have assignments for them, if that makes any sense. Maybe not assignments, more like chores. I'll push them to go outside and build a fort. Like I need a wood pile picked up. So like, hey, can you go ahead and take that wood and make a fort out of it? And they'll go and clean up the area and move it over to their little fort area and make something out of it, or encourage them like to throw the ball. My older son is trying to teach my younger son how to play baseball. So, those are the encouragement things that we can do. So, I think that's a valid point, is making sure that you're spending enough time coming up with an idea to keep the kids active that is beneficial to them, that it keeps them healthy. Because we don't want our children to grow up watching the tablet or just watching the TV or just playing video games. We want them outside. We want them doing things. We want them active. We want them to explore reality and learn in that regard. But Nix, why don't we just go ahead and give a quick recap of everything we covered, if you don't mind?
Of course. So we started by talking about the pros of remote work for dads. The major highlights were having more time with the kids, the flexibility to attend appointments, and the ability to schedule work around family needs. We also touched on the lack of commute, which saves time and stress. But of course, there are some cons, like the difficulty of having a standard schedule, the potential for distractions, and the isolation that can come with not being in the office with coworkers. We also discussed the impact remote work can have on career progression, since you might not always be seen or heard as much. Then, we dove into how to handle distractions, like kids needing attention during meetings. Encouraging outdoor activities or giving them tasks, like building a fort or practicing baseball, is a good strategy to keep them engaged while you're working. It's all about balancing work and family life in a way that supports both, right? Anything you'd add to that summary?
Yeah, actually, I'm sitting here, and on camera you can see the two heads of Commander Cody and Captain Rex. Commander Cody, my older son, and I built just before we even started the podcast, and we had bought Captain Rex, but we had never gotten around to it. And I remember one time my younger son was the only one with me. The other two were one was at school, and the other one was with their aunt, I believe, maybe their mom. And I actually had meetings, and I needed to keep him entertained, but there was no one to give me a hand. So I actually broke out Captain Rex because he loves Legos. I said, hey, I really need this built. Can you build it? And it worked about maybe 80% of the way. It worked about 80% of the way because of the other 20%, he couldn't get one certain part, or he couldn't get the stickers on, so there was a little bit of interruption, but it did actually free me up where I was able to do my meetings, because I had about 3 meetings back to back, about 3 hours long on meetings. And it did free me up. It was able to give him an activity with something that he loved, and it made a great prop for the show. So
That's a great way to combine work and play. Using their interests, like building with Legos, as a way to keep them occupied while you get your work done is a smart approach. Plus, it gives them something creative to focus on. Sounds like a win-win. Would you like to continue with any additional topics related to remote work and parenting, or explore something else for the next segment?
no, I think we can end Tuesday's segment, but for Thursday's segment, I am thinking that we should break down the immigration aspect of what's going on in the United States right now, and pull up the polls on how many people are supporting deportations, all that fun jazz. Because it's a major topic, is one of Trump's major running points or items that he was running on, and I think we need to spend a little bit more time diving into that and figuring out where people are standing now that we've actually had about 4 months of Trump in office, and seeing how people are feeling about it.
Got it. Sounds like an important and timely topic. Diving into the public's current views on immigration, especially given Trump's policies and the evolving situation, will be a great way to gauge the shifts in perspective. If you'd like, I can help you pull up some recent polls when we get closer to the recording.
Yeah, let's go ahead and pull those up actually while we're recording for Thursday's episode. We're not going to be doing that tonight. I need to get some sleep because I got an early morning.
Sounds like a plan. Definitely get some rest, and we can dive into those polls when we record Thursday's episode. Rest up, Captain.
Will do. Why don't you say goodbye to the audience, and until next time.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Until next time, take care.
All right, guys. I'm enjoying having Nix as the co-partner. It's interesting. She does a much better way of articulating things, and I do like the fact that we can go and ask questions. And like, check out Thursday's episode. We're going to be doing it. We're going to find out, what current polling is actually saying about some of the immigration topics. So thank you guys for tuning in. Till next time. Thank you for watching. Till next time.
Peace.